Good morning.
Good morning.
Today, we meet Rack, Shack, and Benny. These bold men are faced with deciding what is important to them. Let's give you a little history lesson here. The Jews had been residing in the Promised Land. The Assyrian Empire had already taken control of the northern kingdom, which was Israel, and now the Babylonians have come in, and they have conquered the entirety of the Assyrian Empire as well as the southern kingdom of Judah. They've effectively moved all of the Jews out of the Promised Land and into Babylon. This is part of the period known as the exile. What's important to understand here is that the Jews are not in their homeland, and they are often oppressed and persecuted. Now, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah have been identified as highly skilled, and they were given positions of prominence in the empire. Daniel should be a name that you already recognize. But you're probably thinking that you've never heard of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Well, that's part of the story. As the Jews were taken from their homeland, they were also stripped of their Hebrew names. So you may know these fellows better by their names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which were their Babylonian names, or as we lovingly call them, Rack, Shack, and Benny. Here in this foreign land, Jews have been dispersed and forced to assimilate in many ways, not the least of which is being forced to change their names. Despite this persecution, Rack, Shack, and Benny are prepared to lay down their lives to stand by God. I've always liked to believe that I am a person of high integrity. Integrity was once defined to me as being honest, good, and true to your values, even when you don't have to be, like when there would be no negative consequences for doing so. But I often catch myself when I'm on the clock and I take some time to enjoy scrolling through Facebook. Where's my integrity then? When someone questions my methods, and instead of reassessing such methods, I list my credentials, where then is my integrity? When I see someone being mistreated at the grocery store, and I choose to walk away, where then is my integrity? When I am faced with death for following Jesus, and I choose to deny him, where then is my integrity? Now, I've never been faced with death for holding Christian beliefs, but many in our world have, and many more will be. Integrity is hard to maintain under normal circumstances, so we can hardly expect people to be true to their Christian identity in the face of death. In the story of Rack, Shack, and Benny, it is likely that when Babylon was commanded to bow down before King Neb's golden statue, there were many Jews present, and they were faced with the threat of a fiery death, so they bow. It seems like an easy choice, right? Bow or die. Follow orders or die. Conform or die. Give in to the powers that be or die. Stick to the status quo or die. Support the king or die. Enable tyranny or die. Worship other gods or die. And this is where the decision became less simple for our friends Rack, Shack, and Benny, for they understood that obeying the command of the king did not simply mean bending low. It meant breaking the first commandment.
Thou shalt have no other gods.
But my job is pretty important too.
I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have any gods before me.
But sleep is precious, and I would rather be sleeping right now.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Well, family, right? Family first.
You must not have other gods.
But soccer and the Vikings and peer pressure and money and kids and Disney Plus and there are a million other ands that can be added to that list. What is on your list that sometimes or often makes it up above God in priority? How about the media? Period. We are reminded daily by the media what is to be important in our lives. Sports scores, life of the rich and famous, vanity, political power, not to mention social norms, fitting in and not making waves. These are all things that can overcome our desire and attempt to keep God first. They make it hard to maintain our Christian integrity. And we are not faced with death. Our friends Shadrach and Benny were faced with death and prepared to make waves when they chose God. We are simply faced with being different because we turned on Christian music instead of the top 40. Or feeling weird because we prayed before a meal in public. Being left out because we chose to go to worship instead of basketball practice. Missing kickoff because we were making sandwiches for the homeless. What is getting in the way of us putting God first? Now, I want you to know that when you choose God, you are promised a long, happy life full of blessings, prosperity, including fireproof skin to protect you if you are thrown into a fiery furnace. No, you're not. In fact, Jesus tells us that life following him will be hard and the world will reject us. That sounds pretty horrible. So why would we even consider it? Because when we choose God, we are promised unconditional love. Now note, it's unconditional, which means that you don't earn it anyway. Therefore, you also can't lose God's love by skipping out on VBS. Instead, when you choose God, you get to experience God's love in new ways. I can't tell you exactly how that works because it'll be unique to your experience. When I choose God, the world is simply brighter. I can tell the difference because I promise you I don't make that choice every day. We aren't promised that life will be easy when we put God first. We aren't promised that we won't have pain when we choose God. Shadrach and Benny can attest to that. In verse 18, we see the words, "But even if God does not, even if God who could save them chooses to let them perish, Shadrach and Benny will remain faithful to God." Imagine that. Surely, if you knew that God would save you, it would be somewhat reasonable to believe that maybe you would consider disobeying King Neb. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or rather Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who know that they could perish a horribly painful death, still choose God. Still put God above all else. They experienced love that was so huge that they were saved from a fiery death. By choosing God, they also led King Nebuchadnezzar to God, which most likely brought many Babylonians to God as well. That is a beautiful way to experience God's love. I'm not imploring you to choose God in the face of death, because many of us can simply not even imagine those circumstances. But I am encouraging you to consider what gets in the way of you truly experiencing God's love. What are you prioritizing above God? And if you think that maybe you don't really want to prioritize God, I would challenge you to first see how experiencing God's love changes your life. Let me tell you about one of the ways that the love of God has changed my life. Just over 3 years ago, I reluctantly showed up to an interview for a job that meant leaving the church home that I had just made. The job wasn't enough hours to support me through seminary, and I couldn't even meet my supervisor because they were still in the process of calling someone in that position. But I met the kids, and they stole my heart. They asked what kind of music I listened to, and when I bashfully told them that it was usually Christian music, they didn't give up on me. They used a lot of teenage lingo that I didn't know, and they giggled when I told them I had no idea what they just said. They were curious and welcoming, excited and willing to show up. So I took the job. I expected to be able to build relationships with the youth here at Prince of Peace, and I did that. I hope that they were just as blessed by those as I was. What I didn't expect was to be embraced by the entire community. I didn't expect to be invited to sing and play and worship with the choir, but I was loved and encouraged in ways that I had never been. I didn't expect to have my ideas and my voice valued in staff meetings. I practiced this. We were going to get through this. But I was respected and embraced as an important voice. I didn't expect to be invited to dinners and coffee with members of the congregation. I didn't expect to have muffins delivered to my door on my birthday when we were in a pandemic. I didn't expect to be shown how the love of God is spread through a room of $100 bills. I didn't expect to be comfortable feeling vulnerable to the people of Prince of Peace. I didn't expect to find family here at Prince of Peace. But I do know that I will forever be changed by my time here. I know generosity in new ways. I know how to support others in new ways. I know what can be done with a team who is looking to do the work of God. I have experienced God's love at Prince of Peace. And I do expect that you, Prince of Peace, will continue to show that unconditional love to God's people. Blessings to you. Thank you for everything, and choose God.